Hello, this is Angelia, and you are listening to or watching the podcast, Why You Do What You Do. The podcast that talks about human development and psychology to maybe help you figure out a little bit more about why you do what you do. And today we're going to be talking about selective optimization with compensation. And we talked a little bit about that before. Optimization is where you optimize what you got that works and compensate for those things that aren't working so well in your life. So, according to Baltez and his colleagues, successful aging depends on having goals to guide development and resources that make these goals potentially achievable. So, we all should have some sort of goal, even if it's just to get through to your next meal or whatever. A goal is something that you will work towards. And some people have goals that might cost them something to where they need to have the resources to make these things possible. And I had never start a business or charity until I realized I didn't have to put up all the money. I could, have a charity where people would donate and give us money to do programs. So then I was like, oh, okay, well, let's do that, guys, and so we did that. And as far as my business, I ran it out of my home in a shoestring budget. And I did that for 17 years. And like I say, I helped people out in the community. Our charity helped 188 people out in the community. So we did some good. I'd like to have done more, but, we just didn't have the community support, the donors to make that happen. Live in a very traditional town, and they're a little skeptical for new charities. And I understand that because every now and then on the news you see one that is, ripping people off and, embezzling and things like that. And then you're like, great, now this is why people don't trust, other people. That's great. So, you might want to make a plan where you can, you don't have to be putting out a lot of money if you don't have it. A lot of folks get to middle age and fall apart. They have nervous breakdowns because they realize this is not how my life was supposed to be, and this is not what I wanted. And, by this age, I was supposed to have this, that, and the other thing. And, I wanted this out of life, and I don't have it. And, whether that be job, significant other, children, whatever. As far as your goals go, have the goals. Go for the goals. But, realize that stuff has to work in a real way. If you want to start a business, and it's not something that, people think is great in this community, you don't want to go out and borrow $200,000 to do that. There was a company that was loaning people money to start these businesses, and they called themselves a community endeavor. But all the people that I know that did this thing and took this money ended up losing the money, having problems paying back the money. One woman lost her home. So no, you don't go into debt that you don't need to. You start small and work your way up. That's my advice. Now, if you have reached a certain point in your business where you're making X amount and you want to borrow, that much more, okay, that's a feasible risk. But again, your goals should be commensurate with your situation. Because at age 30, you're not going to magically have X amount of money coming in. At age 50, you're not magically going to have X amount of money coming in. Age 60, you got to put your toe in the water, see how it feels first, as the saying goes. Excuse me. In old age, indeed, throughout life, say these investigators, this occurs through selective optimization with compensation. Again, optimizing what's good and what works and what you're best at, and compensating for those things that you're not. According to this concept, the aging brain compensates for losses in certain areas by selectively optimizing or making the most of other abilities. So, you're naturally in life from school, probably you knew this. What you're good at is what you like the most, and that's where you're going to be able to excel. What you're not so good at is an area where you're going to struggle. So most people go with what they're good at. But as we get older, we might find what we're good at isn't steady. It doesn't stay. Like after I had my stroke, I used to memorize a lot of stuff. I could memorize word for word. After my stroke, I couldn't memorize word for word anymore. And in fact, I had to stop, going for auditions and things where I had to do lines because I could not remember them. Just couldn't do it. Brain just couldn't do it anymore. So I just was doing extra work and things because just can't, just can't, I enjoyed improv for that reason. I can improv all day, but I can't. You give me 3 paragraphs, lines to remember, I'm gonna get at least one wrong. So, we compensate by selective living, basically. For example, the celebrated concert pianist Arthur Rubinstein, who gave his farewell concert at age 89, compensated for memory and motor losses by keeping up a smaller repertoire. So, he didn't play as much as he used to play. Practicing longer each day, which, practice makes perfect, or adequate at least. And playing more slowly before fast movements. And that way, he would keep a contrast, which he could no longer play at top speed. Because, the digits slow down, I know that. To heighten the contrast between what was supposed to be fast and slow. The same principle applies to psychosocial development. Like I say, the brain, we tend to gravitate towards what we're good at and kind of lean away from or neglect what we're not so good at. So this is no exception as we get older. We do that even more. As we have seen, older adults can often be more flexible than younger ones in selecting coping strategies, because you got more up here. You can decide what works best for you, what you've seen work in the past, what did not work best, what you've seen from people who didn't work out so good. We have more to draw upon as we get older. And thus can optimize well-being in the face of overwhelming, intractable problems. Because, let's face it, sometimes there'll be a problem you just can't solve. It can't be solved with your current situation. So, as you get older, you learn, okay, well, maybe we can't do that, but maybe we can do something else. Maybe we can turn this around another way. And younger folks, they're young, they're impulsive, they're trying to get to the top, and they might not be able to think outside the box as much as older folks can. Their greater ability to avail themselves of emotion-focusing strategies may compensate for loss of control over certain areas of their lives. Because, let's face it, we can't control everything. There are people who try to. That usually makes them, an anxious, nervous mess. But, as we get older, we learn that not everything is a winnable battle. Not everything is a 5-alarm fire. And we can pick and choose what, we're going to focus on in our life. There are things I've let go in the past that just were not, worth my time and effort and stress to deal with. And I was like, I gotta let this go. It's just not feeding me in any way, and actually it's draining me. So it's gotta go. And younger folks, they're coming up and being taught by older folks even that pay their dues. So they think they have to stay in and put up with stuff and do things. And, us older folks, we come to the point where our peace, and our peace of mind is more important. So some of that stuff can just go, because we don't want to deal with it. Also, as Carstenson's socio-emotional theory, selectivity theory, suggests, people become more selective about social contacts as they age. Like I said, as you get older, you want to be around people who, are like people who are positive and people who are there for you, real friends. Like I say, I got a handful of friends I know, no matter what, they would be there. And I would do the same for them. And I also know the friends who, if I want something spread around to the world, I tell them. So, you know who your real friends are. Maintaining contact with people who can best meet their current needs for emotional satisfaction. And that's important. Like I say, there are people I know, I can talk to them about anything, and I know they're going to be there for me. And they're going to, act like they should be acting. So we know there are people in our lives who are going to give us emotional satisfaction, and we know there are people in our lives who are not going to do that, who are going to give us emotional dissatisfaction. So as we get older, we don't go to these people just because they're there. We learn who to trust with ourselves and who not to. Such meaningful contacts may help older people compensate for the narrowing of possibilities in their lives. Because it does, as you get more unable to do things and more concentrated. It's like my grandmother, she was friends with like all her neighbors. And it's because like they would walk out and talk in the, on the porches or whatever. And that's because, they weren't driving around as much, weren't doing much. The social circle shrinks. And that's like, the assisted living place where my mother-in-law is now. There's a group of ladies. They sit out and play cards at the tables in the evening. They go sit in the lounge area on the couches and talk and, knit and things like that. So, they're making the best of their situation and, finding friends. And, that's what she needs to do, honestly. And a lot of other people need to do that too. And that would make their life a little happier and a little better. But again, everything that you did when you were young isn't possible when you're older. So you're going to have to learn to compensate and optimize the positives in your life and what you can do to make your life your own. As in cognitive appraisal theory, assessment of available resources is important to these and other adaptations. Because like I say, as you change, you have to adapt. And that's why people who say they don't believe in evolution, it's like you grow and adapt all the time, and like I say, why would God create creatures who couldn't grow and adapt to their environment? That would be dumb, and God's not dumb. So, it's a fact. We have to grow and adapt. Otherwise, our life's going to be pretty freaking hard because we're going to be fighting all the time. But, excuse me. You have to go with what you know. You have to do with what you have. Because if you have illusions about that, it's going to make your life all the harder. So, you're going to have to adapt to your situation. It may not always be what you want, especially as you get older, but it's just going to be what it is. Que sera, sera. The argument about what constitutes successful or optimal aging is far from settled and may never be. And that's because it means different to everyone. Everyone's different, and so everyone's idea of what optimal aging is going to be different. So there's no one answer for successful or optimal aging. It depends on you and what you want to do, and if you feel like you did it well. One thing is clear. People differ greatly in the ways they can and do live and want to live the later years of life, because everybody's different. Like I said, what's right for one is not right for the other. One person might want to just do nothing. The other person might want to go and do things they couldn't do when they were younger. And everybody's different, so it's going to look different to everybody. So like I say, there's not one size fits all when it comes to, old age. It's just not. So as we get older, we're going to use some selective optimization with compensation, because there are going to be things we're still good at it and still can do, and there are going to be some other things that maybe not so much. So to compensate for that, we're going to lean on the things that we are good at. So I hope that helped you figure out maybe a little bit more about why you do what you do. Please like and share this educational program so we can spread it around the world. If you want to help me out, subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you want to help me out even more, go to my Patreon page and become a patron. Thanks for watching. That's all for now. Until next time.